In 1648, exhausted Europeans buried 8 million dead and signed a treaty that invented the modern world, one where borders were sovereign, and no single empire could dictate God, law, or order to its neighbors. The Middle East never got that treaty. It's still fighting for it. Most people remember the 30 Years' War as a religious conflict, Catholics versus Protestants, God's armies tearing apart the German heartland in his name. That reading is flattering and false. Religion was the costume. Underneath it, the war was a brutal, decades-long argument over a single question: who gets to write the rules? France was Catholic, yet it funded Protestant princes against the Catholic Habsburgs. Why? Because Cardinal Richelieu understood that ideology was secondary. Power was the point. The Habsburgs, if left unchecked, would become the permanent architects of European order, and France refused to live in a world it did not help design. Today, in the Middle East, the same war is being fought, not with pikes and muskets, but with ballistic missiles, nuclear thresholds, proxy militias, and normalization deals. The Iran-Israel-USA triad is not primarily a conflict about religion or even territory. It is the definitive battle over who dictates the security architecture of the 21st century Middle East. The prize isn't land, it's the pen. Whoever wins this struggle gets to decide what counts as an act of war, what constitutes deterrence, which alliances are legitimate, and which nations get a seat at the table when the region's future is written. That is why this conflict is existential for everyone involved, and why it cannot be resolved with a ceasefire alone. To understand the current struggle, you need to see each actor not just as a nation-state with interests, but as a historical archetype replaying a very old script. The United States plays the role of the Habsburgs, the incumbent superpower defending an existing universal order. Like the Holy Roman Empire, America does not simply seek dominance for its own sake. It genuinely believes its framework: free navigation, non-proliferation, rules-based trade, American-backed alliances is the legitimate, stabilizing architecture for the world. The Habsburgs believed their Catholic imperial order was divinely sanctioned and universally beneficial. America believes the same about the liberal international order, and like the Habsburgs, this conviction makes Washington simultaneously principled and blind to how its dominance looks from the outside. Iran mirrors Richelieu's France, the cunning revisionist power that has no interest in simply destroying the existing order, but every interest in ensuring it is not the one excluded from writing the next one. Tehran does not need to win militarily. It needs to exhaust, complicate, and outlast. It funds Hezbollah, arms the Houthis, supports militias in Iraq and Syria, not because it expects these groups to defeat America or Israel, but because they keep the regional order perpetually unsettled. An unsettled order is one that can be renegotiated, and renegotiation is Iran's real goal. Israel resembles the Protestant princes of the German states, not an empire, not a revisionist power, but a mid-sized actor whose survival depends entirely on the shape of the surrounding order. The Protestant princes did not fight the 30 Years' War to dominate Europe. They fought because the wrong outcome meant annihilation. Israel's calculus is the same. It cannot afford to lose a single round. It does not need to conquer the Middle East. It needs the regional order to guarantee its right to exist within it. That is why it clings so fiercely to American backing, just as the Protestant princes sought French gold. Not from weakness of conviction, but from a cold-eyed reading of the odds. The 30 Years' War was fought on German soil, not because Germany was the primary antagonist, but because it was the arena. The local German principalities became proxy battlegrounds for French, Swedish, Habsburg, and Spanish ambitions. They burned regardless of which great power they nominally supported. Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza, Iraq, and Syria are today's German principalities. The populations of these territories suffer not primarily because of their own conflicts, but because they are the arena in which the larger war is conducted. Hezbollah is not merely a Lebanese political party. It is Iran's forward position in a regional chess game. The Houthis are not merely a Yemeni rebel movement. They are a strategic lever against Saudi Arabia and a choke point against global shipping. Gaza is not merely a humanitarian catastrophe. It is the most visible and painful fault line between two incompatible visions of regional order. Then there is the nuclear threshold, the ultimate rule-setting weapon. Iran's nuclear program is not merely a military project. It is a sovereignty argument. A nuclear Iran would be an Iran that cannot be regime changed, an Iran that can no longer be threatened into compliance, an Iran that gets to set terms rather than receive them. For Israel, a nuclear Iran crosses a single red line that transforms a manageable rivalry into an existential threat. For the United States, it destroys the non-proliferation architecture that has held for decades. The nuclear question is, at its core, a Westphalian question. Does Iran get to be truly sovereign, or does sovereignty in this region come with a ceiling? And then there are the normalization deals, the Abraham Accords and their successors. These are not simply diplomatic achievements. They are attempted treaty rewrites. Every Arab state that normalizes with Israel is functionally endorsing the existing security architecture over Iran's revisionist alternative. They are signing the Westphalian Compact before the war is over, betting that the current order will hold, and that aligning with it now buys them a seat at the table it produces. Strip away the specific grievances, the sanctions, the assassinations, the airstrikes, the proxy wars, and you find a single ancient argument running beneath all of it. Whose concept of order gets to be universal? Iran's argument is fundamentally Westphalian. Our sphere, our rules. Iran is not asking to dominate the entire world. It is asking with increasing fury and sophistication to be left alone to dominate its own region, free from American military presence, free from Israeli strikes on its proxies, free from sanctions imposed by powers that recognize no limits to their own reach. This is, ironically, the very logic that the Peace of Westphalia enshrined in 1648. Sovereignty is inviolable. Interference is illegitimate. Great powers must respect the sphere of others. America's argument is universalist. Some norms transcend borders, non-proliferation, freedom of navigation, protection of allies, prevention of genocide. Washington insists that these are not impositions. They are the foundation of an order that benefits everyone. The Habsburgs made the same argument about the Catholic Universal Church. This is not domination, this is civilization. The fact that France and, later, the Protestant princes rejected that framing did not make the Habsburgs wrong in their own eyes. It simply made them lose. Israel's dilemma is the sharpest of all. It needs a rules-based order to survive, but it is not the author of those rules, and it sometimes violates them when survival demands it. It is a state built on the ruins of statelessness, defending itself within a system it did not design, against enemies who reject both the system and its presence. The instinct to frame this conflict as a second Cold War, America and Israel versus Iran and its axis of resistance, is understandable and wrong. The Cold War was a contest between two universalist ideologies that each claimed to speak for all of humanity. It had a clear ideological grammar: capitalism versus communism, freedom versus oppression. The Middle Eastern struggle is something older and stranger. It is a contest of civilizational legitimacy, not just who has more missiles, but whose story of order gets written into the region's DNA. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Project, America's liberal internationalism, and Israel's existential nationalism are not simply policy positions. They are competing cosmologies about what a legitimate political community looks like and what makes a regional order just. The Cold War ended when one side collapsed economically and politically. This conflict will not end that way. Iran will not collapse. America will not withdraw into full isolation. Israel will not simply disappear. This makes the Westphalian analogy more accurate and more sobering. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 did not happen because one side won. It happened because after 30 years of catastrophic war, all sides were too exhausted too bled out and too economically shattered to continue. The peace was not a victory. It was an acknowledgment of limits. What would a Middle Eastern Westphalia even look like? It would require, at minimum, a mutual recognition of spheres, some acknowledgment that Iran's security concerns are legitimate, that Israel's existence is non-negotiable, and that American presence in the region comes with genuine constraints. It would require a neutral or multipolar convener, not America alone, but perhaps a framework that includes China, the Gulf states, Turkey, and the European Union. It would require the kind of exhaustion that has not yet arrived, though Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen suggest it is being accumulated one atrocity at a time. The haunting lesson of the 30 Years' War is not that the peace was impossible, it is that it took 30 years to arrive at it. The fighting did not stop because statesmen became wise. It stopped because the alternative was the permanent destruction of everything everyone was fighting to preserve. The Middle East is not there yet. But the architecture of exhaustion is being built brick by brick, strike by strike, proxy by proxy. The question is not whether a new Westphalian order will eventually emerge from this struggle. It almost certainly will. The only question is how many people have to die before the pen is finally picked up.